All right. Looks like we're live. How are you doing today? Hello, Meow and Criminal Med and our wonderful Barb. How are you guys doing? So glad to see you all. Hey, did y'all notice I had a little bit of um, a little bit of an intro going this time, not just a complete nothing. I've figured out a few things, but we're going to work on it. But anyway, can y'all hear me okay? Because I don't know. The little microphone thing did not show me that little meter. It did not go up and down. So just kind of let me know, please. Hey. Oh, my Lord. Let me tell you what we have now. We've got the next book in our series. Now, listen, I thought I ordered The Psychology of Charles Manson. But what I actually ordered was called The Manson Family Manual. I'm going to try to show you this book. It is huge. Not at all what I expected. I don't know if you can see this here. Here we go. Hey, how do I get rid of this? Let me get rid of this stupid background thing. I don't like that. Hang on a second. But anyway, and the other funny thing about this book is all of the pages have like big print, like I can't see. Anyway, it's kind of thank you, Barb. I really appreciate that. I really do. I'm gonna see if I can get rid of this crazy little background. I don't like it. I don't need it. My little room where I go is clean, so I'm sorry. I have to laugh at myself. If I don't laugh at myself, well, you know how that goes. No, it's not. It's it's called the Manson Family Manual, and it goes through it's very interesting. It goes through every one of the people who were involved, what their story was, how they got involved, their age, all that kind of thing. It's really, really interesting. I'm just excited to have it. I think it'll be great. It's going to take a little while to get through it, but that's okay. But we're going to have some guests to come and talk about this case too, because she's into the psychology of it as well. And I really like that. That's why I want to do it. So anyway, I thought you might be excited about that. What happens if you just push this over here? Hang on just a minute, okay, y'all? Let's see if we can get rid. No, that's not right. Okay, I'm just trying to get rid of that stupid background. I don't need it. Hang on a second. It might be over here at this right here. Background. Oh, I think it is down here. Well, there we go. All right. I don't know. Hell. We'll just go with it like it is. I'm just going to go back to comments, and we're fine. We're absolutely fine. Yeah, it gives the facts of it starts at like the very beginning from his childhood, and it just kind of moves you forward. And then as people come into his life that he meets, then they get added to it as well. It's a very interesting book the way it was written, and I'm very excited to talk about it because some people are not really old enough to remember all of this Charles Manson thing. And I know you've seen a lot of things on television and all of that, but what's on television and what's in a book are two different things, because there's no way that they can condense everything from the book into a television show. It would just take forever. I mean, you would be the longest miniseries ever, because you have to put 6 commercials in it and all that. But anyway, okay. So here's my guest for today. I can't show him. Never mind, because I got to get rid of this background first, and I don't really know how. So anyway, I'll show him next time. What do you mean new scene? Wait a minute. What's this? New scene? How about no scene? No, that's okay. No, we're good. Okay, we'll just go with it. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. I don't want to mess up anything. I'm so afraid. Oh, I don't want it to be cut off. I don't want to see none of that. So here we go. All right. So we're back over here. But anyway, I was going to show you something that I got that I thought was so cute. My child collects these things from StreamYard. I don't know if y'all know what this. I'm sorry, not StreamYard. Sprayground. It's called Sprayground, and they make like a few different items, but they'll come out with these. They'll come out with these like one particular. It looks like some print or whatever, and they make that one. And then after that one has sold out, they never make it again, which is the interesting thing about this stuff. And it's like backpacks and totes and that kind of thing. Well, I got this pink bear, and it's so cute because the purse that goes with it, it's funny, the purse that goes with it, the little bear has a little purse too, and it looks like it's the same kind of print on the little bear's purse. It's just too cute. I know, I feel like I'm a 14-year-old, and I know it's kind of babyish, but I don't know. I just like them. They're just so cute. They just are. So anyway, that's enough gabbing about me. How are y'all doing? Everybody good? Did y'all see what came out today about Sebastian? Did y'all see that little picture that came out this morning? It was that some guy with glasses on and a watch. Did you see that? Because what I did was when I saw that, I decided to look at what was in the reflection of his glasses to see if I could see anything, and I really could see things. Does it go with anything? I don't really know. But I'm sure somebody will share that, and somebody will say, "Oh yeah, it does," or "Oh yeah, it doesn't." But I don't really want to get into the picture thing because who knows? Would a 13-year-old? Yes, a 13-year-old would love these. It's perfect, and they're not. Some of them can be expensive, but some of them are not expensive. So, like, if it's a collector bear, and if they only make, I don't know, 15 of this one color, then it's a collector's item. Is what it is. And so, like, the bear ranges from $50 to $90, that kind of thing. The little tote bags, which are just cute, they can range from anywhere from $40 to $80. I mean, it's just things like that. I don't consider them super expensive, but I don't consider them cheap either. It's just it's the collector's item. That's the whole thing about it. Because you're not going to buy your 13-year-old daughter a expensive Dooney & Bourke or something like that. But you'll find this other tote bag that's the collector's item because the other kids are carrying spray ground too. So it's kind of cool. What's it called? It's called spray ground. I'll type it for you in the. Oh no! Stop it! Crap! Stop that! Hang on a minute. I'm gonna type it for you so you'll know. And they have you just go to their website and they every once in a while they drop new stuff. It'll be like, okay, the new drop is going to be whatever day it is, and so it's really some cute things. Some of it is a little pricey, like they have suitcases and that kind of thing. But anyway. But like people like me and you, we're not going to buy a suitcase, obviously, because number one, it would never hold all the stuff that we're going to carry. It's like it is like child size stuff, I guess you would say. So anyway, come on, thing, don't you be doing that. Now listen, there's something weird that happens over here. Okay, we're good. All right. I thought my little laptop was going to do that crazy thing where it starts this not scrolling down to show you the comments. All of a sudden you're just stuck. I didn't want that to happen. But anyway. Okay, so are y'all ready to start reading our book? Let me see. Where is our book? Hello. I just had it. Oh, here it is. Hang on a second. I'll be right back. Whoops, here it is. Funny, isn't it? Okay, so it's called. All right. So we are finally on chapter 7 of our book, The Sociopath Next Door. And I'm going to read this one all the way through. We're not going to just stop in the middle to switch over to Manson because this is a little more interesting. We're actually going to finish it because, one thing I noticed about this book is each one of these chapters is just describing one of the actions or behaviors that makes up the whole sociopath. Like if they might have 5 of them, but not all 8 of them or whatever. I mean, it's that kind of thing. That's what I finally understood about this book because I was like, what is going on in this book? It's just this one and that one and this one. It's not like, and it's just little stories that go with that, which I thought was kind of pretty interesting. But anyway, so I know we're on chapter 7. I was able to read 5 and 6 last time, and it's downloaded, so you all can. If you didn't get to see it, you can always go back and watch it whenever you want to, or listen to it while you're in the car, that kind of thing. Oh God, I'll have to turn the light on. Hang on, Lord. Oh no! I hate turning the light on. You might actually see me then. Anyway, all right. So here we go. We're going to start reading this. Oh, we've already wasted 10 of our minutes. No, I'm sorry. We're not wasting 10 minutes. We're enjoying ourselves. All right. So as we go, chapter 7, the etiology of the guiltlessness. What causes sociopathy? I know I just get right into reading because I love it. I like to read. All right. Now remember Luke? He was in our last story. Luke, Doreen, and Skip. That's who's been our story so far. And so now they're coming back into this chapter. In many ways, Luke, Doreen, and Skip are very different from one another. Luke favors inertia. He likes to lounge and to let responsible friends and family members take care of everything else. Doreen is envious and a chronic malcontent. Okay, this damn author. Hang on a minute. And a chronic malcontent. Okay. She exerts a great deal of energy trying to make other people look smaller so that she can feel bigger. And Skip would like to run the world for his own benefit, of course. And his grandiose form of entertainment. But what these three diversely motivated human beings have in common is that, in the interest of their individual ambitions, they can do anything at all without the slenderest glimmer of guilt. They have no guilt. They have no shame. Things that you and I just cannot imagine a person not having. I mean, I don't know if I could live like that every day, just feeling like, oh, well, whatever I want to do to you, I'm going to do to it. And oh, well, no. How do you teach children to be responsible people if you do not teach them those things? Anyway, so each of them desires something different, but they all get what they want in exactly the same fashion, which is to say, completely without shame. Skip breaks the law and ruins careers and lives, and he feels nothing. Doreen makes her whole life into a lie and torments the helpless for the thrill of making her colleagues look bad, and all without the slightest blip of embarrassment or accountability. For someone to take care of him, a rent-free house and a swimming pool, Luke lovelessly marries a decent woman who wants to have a family and then steals some of the joy from his son's childhood in an attempt to retain his own childlike dependency. And he makes such decisions without thinking twice, let alone being assailed by guilt. None of these people has an intervention. I'm sorry. None of these people have intervening seventh sense of obligation based on emotional attachments. While sadly, this commonality among them does not make them extremely rare, it does make them profoundly different from all people who have a conscience. All three are members of a group apart, a human category in which the distinguishing features, the absence of conscience, cuts across the other personality features and even gender in terms of how individuals perceive their surroundings and go about their lives. Doreen is more like Luke and Skip than she is like any woman in the world who has a conscience. And laconic, Luke and Skip are driven. They're more, I'm sorry, this is so crazy. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so Skips are more like each other than any conscience-bound man or woman of any temperament whatsoever. What carves the deep and yet strangely invisible dividing line across the human race? Why do some people not have a conscience? What causes sociopathy? Luke, like so many human characteristics, both physical and psychological, the primary question is that of nature versus nurture. Oh yeah, we've heard that before. People have discussed that. Is this a characteristic born into the blood, or is it created by the environment? Yeah, is it? Are we born with it, or do we learn it? That's another thing I always wanted to know. So, for most complex psychological features, the answer is very probably both. In other words, a predisposition for the characteristic is present at conception, but the environment regulates how it is expressed. This is true for both the traits we consider negative and for those we think of as positive. For example, the level of intelligence would appear to be strongly determined by genetic makeup, but partly shaped by an elaborate toolbox of environmental factors as well, such as parental care, early stimulation, nutrition, turn the page, and even birth order. That's something else I've always wondered about. So, yeah, here we go. Sociopaths derivance is decidedly more negative. They're more negative characteristics. It's probably no exception to some of each paragram. Boy, research indicates that both nature and nurture are involved. Psychologists have long known that many aspects of the personality, such as extroversion and neuroticism, are influenced to some degree by genetic factors. Much of the scientific evidence for this is provided by studies comparing identical and fraternal twins. The underlying premise is that such research is that identical twins share an environment and all their genes, whereas fraternal twins share an environment but only half of their genes. Wow. Okay. Listen to this. I just thought that the difference between the twins is they just didn't look alike. I didn't realize that they were. I mean, you know how you have twins that the twins will say, oh, I know what he's thinking, or I'm going to finish his sentence, or that kind of thing. Do you think that fraternal twins versus identical twins have that ability too? Because I always wanted to know about that. What do y'all think? I mean, I don't know anybody personally who has twins. I wanted twins, but that's not what I got. Anyway, I don't know anybody who has twins, so I can't really ask them that question. But I've always wondered about that. Anyway, we'll go on to the next thing. I know I get sidetracked and start talking about something else. Researchers use a number that is double the difference between the identical twin correlation and the fraternal twin correlation to indicate the amount of variation throughout to be accounted for by the genetic factors. The number is referred to as the trait's heritability, and the studies on twins have shown that personality features determined by questionnaires such as extroversion, eroticism, authoritism, empathy, and so forth have a heritability between 35 and 50%. In other words, twin studies indicate that most measurable aspects of our personalities are 35 to 50% innate. Heritability studies contain important information about sociopathy. A number of such studies have included the psychopathic deviant. Oh, who do we know that's that? Yes, who do we know? It's a scale that the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, it's a test that they do. Anyway, the PD scale of the MMPI consists of multiple choice questions that have been statistically formulated to sort out people with sociopathic personality traits from other groups of people. Hey, remember in Letitia Stouch's, in her trial, they talked about her taking this test. Y'all remember that? I do. Anyway. And she was not completely a sociopathic. She just had some kind of a behavioral something. It'll come to me, but anyway. So the inventory includes several validity measures as well as including a lie scale to expose attempts to beat the test. Overall, these studies of identical twins are twice more likely to have similar scores on the PD scale and are as fraternal twins, strongly suggesting at least some genetic role in the psychopathic deviant pattern. A lot of words in this book. A doctor wrote it, you can tell. In 1995, a majority of longitudinal studies was published by the investigated sociopathic traits and their absence of the 3,226 pairs of male twins located through a register of people who had served in the United States Armed Services during the Vietnam War. Wow, that's a mouthful. By the same mathematical model, 8 sociopath symptoms and their absence were found to be significantly heritable. There are in descending order of the neurological heritability, fails to conform to social norms, aggressive, reckless, impulsive, fails to honor financial obligations, inconsistent work, never monogamous, that's the word, and lacks remorse. Still, other studies have found that the sociopaths have low agreeableness, low consciousness, and low harm avoidance. Yeah, they take risk all the time. They don't care. All of which personalities dimensions have a genetic component. The Texas Adoption Project. Now, oh boy, here we go. This is where it's going to talk about adopted children and the testing and over this 30-year period. But okay, here we go. The Texas Adoption Project, which has now been in progress for over 30 years, is a highly regulated longitudinal study of more than 500 adopted children. The study looks at the acquisition of intelligence and various personality features, including the psychopathic deviant. The pattern by comparing adopted children now grown with both their biological and adoptive parents. The Texas Adoption Project reports that where scores on the PD scale are concerned, individuals resemble their birth mothers, whom they have never met, significantly more than they do adoptive parents, who raised them. From research, a heritability estimate is 54% can be derived, and interestingly enough, psychopathic deviants. Figure this is consistent with heritability estimates of 35 to 50%, generally found in the studies of others with more neutral personality characteristics, extroversions, empathy, and so forth. Over and again, heritability studies come up with a statistical finding that has emotionally charged social and political implications. That indeed a person's tendencies to process certain sociopathic characteristics is partially born in the blood, perhaps as much as, oh boy, this is really getting into it, isn't it? As much as 50%. To bring home the provocative nature of this research, it would indicate, for example, that before they were even born, at the very moment of conception, people such as Doreen, Luke, and Skip were already somewhat predisposed to become deceitful, reckless, faithless, and remorseless. When we make heritability statements about athletic ability and introversion, or even bipolar disorders or schizophrenia, somehow the information does not seem so shocking. But to say so about antisocial tendencies goes especially grim, through the same statistical approaches are used. It is important to point out that such extremely complex characteristics are unlikely to be determined by a single gene, but are almost certainly oligenic, okay, meaning caused by multiple genes acting together. And the exact way in which these genes go about sharpening the brain function and the behavior is currently unknown. Getting from a person's DNA to many layered behavior concepts, such as fails to honor financial obligations, is long, laborious, biochemical, neurological, and psychological trip, and correspondingly daunting to study. My God, that was a mouthful. Okay. But research has already provided us with a few potential hints. One important link in the neurobiological behavior segment of the chain may consist of altered functioning in the cerebral cortex of the sociopath. Okay, think about Stephen Stearns. Okay, I know. Okay. In my mind, Stephen Stearns is all of them. How can he do what he did to that little girl and not be? I mean, he's got some of the worst. He's never even had a real job. He worked at Disney, and that's about it. I think when you have two of them together, that is the perfect storm, really. And then we've seen a few couples that were the perfect storm. Lori and Chad. Oh Lord, yes. Jen and yeah. I know people say Jen didn't know anything. Yes, she did know. You do not make the statement, I don't want another, what's his name? I don't want another one of those because I don't want to be left alone. She knew that was already happening, or she would have never made that statement. It'll come to me in a minute what it is. I get all talking and, what is it called, please? It sounds nice. Oh, what are we talking about? Oh, spring run. Okay, we're back on that. Sorry, guys. I got sidetracked. But study has already provided us with a few potential pointed hints. One important link I just read that, didn't I? Hang on a minute. As it turns out, even at the level of electrical activity in the brain, normal people react to emotional words such as love, hate, cozy, pain, happy, and mother more rapidly and more intensely than the relatively neutral words table, chair, 15, later, and etc. If I'm given the task of deciding between words and non-words, I will recognize Tara over Lister much faster in terms of microseconds than I will choose between window and end-dog. And my enhanced reaction to the emotional word Tara can be measured by recording a tiny electrical reaction called an evoked potential. Okay, evoked potential. All right. And my cerebral cortex, such studies indicate that the brain of normal people attend to remember and recognize words that refer to emotional experiences, preferentially to emotion neutral words. Love will be recognized as a word faster than look. A greater evoked potential will result in the brain very much as if love were a more primal and meaningful piece of information than look. Not so for sociopaths. No, they care about how they look. They don't care about who they love because they don't love anybody but themselves. Subjects who have been tested using language processing tasks in the terms of reaction time and evoked potential in the cortex, the sociopath subjects in these experiments respond to emotionally charged words no differently from neutral words. In sociopaths, the evoked potential for sob or kiss is no larger than the one for sat or list, very much if the emotional words were no more meaningful or deeply coded by their brains than any other word. In related research using single photon emission computed tomography, which is brain imaging. Why didn't you say brain imaging technology? Why don't you have to put all that other stuff? Anyway, sociopath subjects showed increased blood flow to the temporal lobes relative to other subjects when they were given a decision task that involved emotional words. To enable our concentration, you or I might exhibit such an increased cerebral blood flow. It was, if asked, to solve a mildly challenging intellectual problem. In other words, sociopaths tried to complete an assignment Based on emotional words, a task that would be almost neurologically instantaneous for normal people reacted psychologically more or less as if they had been asked to work out an algebra problem. Taken together, such studies indicate that sociopathy involves an altered processing of emotional stimuli and that the level of cerebral cortex. Why this altered processing occurs is not yet known, but it is likely to be the result of heritable neurodevelopment differences that can be either slightly compensated for or made much worse by child rearing or cultural factors. Okay, now we're going to blame the parents. Is that right? Okay. The neurodevelopment distinction is the least particularly responsible for the still unfathomed psychological differences between sociopaths and all other people, and its implications are startling. Sociopathy is more than just the absence of conscience. No, oh wait a minute, I was right. I was right. Okay, okay, which alone would be tragic enough. Sociopathy is the inability to process emotional experiences, including love and caring, except when such an experiment can be calculated as coldly and it's a coldly intellectual task. Just as conscience is not merely the presence of guilt and remorse, but based on our capacity to experience emotion of the attachment that result from our feelings. Sociopathy is not just the absence of guilt or remorse. Sociopathy is an arbitration in the ability to have and to appreciate real, non-calculated emotional experiences, and therefore to connect with other people within real, non-calculated relationships. To state the situation concisely, and maybe a little too clearly for comfort, not to have a moral sense flags, okay, not to have a moral sense flag, an even more profound condition, as does the possession of conscience, because conscience never exists without the ability to love, and sociopathy is ultimately based in a lovelessness. Boy, that's a lot, isn't it? It is a lot. Okay. A sociopath is someone who fails to conform to social norms or is never and he fails to honor financial obligations for the straightforward reason that an obligation of any kind is something one feels toward beings and toward a group of beings who matters emotionally. And to a sociopath, we simply do not matter. Sociopathy is the very essence of ice cold, like a dispassionate game of chess. And the way it's different from ordinary duplicationists, narcissism, here we go on this one, even the violence, which are often full of emotional heat. If necessary, most of us would lie to save the life of someone in our family. And it's something of a cliche to point out that a violent gang, wow, this is crazy. A violent gang, as opposed to perhaps his sociopathic leader, may convincingly feel loyal and warmth toward the members of his gang, and tendencies for his mother and siblings. But Skip, even as a child, was not concerned with anyone. Dr. Littlefield could not care about her patients, and Luke could not love even his wife or his own children. In the workings of such minds, other people, even friends and family members, are serviceable game to pieces at most. Love is not possibility or even something that can be comprehended when another person shows it. Wow. The only emotions that sociopaths seem to feel genuinely are the so-called primitive affectionate reactions that result from immediate physical pain and pleasure or from short-term frustrations and successes. Frustrations may engender anger and rage in a sociopath, and predatory success, winning at the giant game of cat and mouse. For example, Doreen's success in sending Jenna on a fool's errand across the muck of a hospital lawn. Remember, she said, "Oh, you're having a meeting," but there was no meeting. She lied. So, oh boy, these emotional reactions are seldom long-lasting, and they are referred to as neurologically primitive because, like all emotions, they originate in the evolutionary ancient limbic system of the brain. But unlike the higher emotions that are not significantly modified by the function of the cerebral cortex. As a counterpoint to the sociopath, the condition of narcissism is particularly interesting and instructive. Narcissism is a metaphorical sense that one half of what sociopathy is. Even in clinical narcissists are able to feel most emotions as strongly as anyone else, from guilt and sadness to desperate love and passion. The half that is missing is the crucial ability to understand what other people are feeling. Narcissism is a failure, not of consciousness, but of empathy. which is the capacity to perceive emotions in others and so react to them appropriately. The poor narcissist cannot see past his own nose, emotionally speaking, and as with Pillsbury Doughboy, any input from the outside would spring back as if nothing had happened. Unlike the sociopath, narcissists often are in psychological pain and may sometimes seek psychotherapy. When a narcissist looks for help, one of the underlying issues is usually that, unbeknownst to him, he is alienating his relationships on account of his lack of empathy with others and his feelings of confused, abandoned, and lonely. He misses the people he loves and is ill equipped to get them back. Sociopathics, in contrast, do not care about other people, and so do not, do not miss them when they are gone or alienated, except as one might regret that the absence of a useful appliance that one had somehow lost. For their own reasons, sociopaths sometimes marry, but they never marry for love. They cannot fall genuinely in love, not with their spouses, their children, or even a pet. Clinicians and researchers have remarked that wherever the highest emotions are concerned, sociopaths know the words, but not the music. They must learn to appear emotional as you and I would, but it's a second language to them, which is to say, by observation, imitation, and practice. And just as you or I would practice, might become fluent in another language, so an intelligent sociopath may become convincingly fluent in the conversational emotion. Wow. Can you imagine living like that? That would be so sad. In fact, this would seem to be only a mildly challenging intellectual task, quite a lot easier than learning French or Chinese. Any person who can observe human actions, even superficially, or who can read novels and watch old movies, can learn to act romantic or interested and soft-hearted. Virtually anyone can learn to say, I love you, or to appear smitten and say the words, oh my, what a cute little puppy. But not all human beings are capable of experiencing the emotion implied by the behavior sociopaths never do. Then it goes into talking about nurture versus nature. So in nurture, we're going to go to nurture now. Still, as we know from the study, so many other human characteristics, genetic predispositions, and neurological differences do not compromise unavoidable destinies. The genetic marble of our life predates our birth, but after we are delivered, the world takes up its sculptor's knife and begins to chisel with its vengeance upon what even material nature has provided. Hereditability studies tell us that for sociopathy in particular, biology is half of the story at most. In addition, the genetic factors, there are environmental variables that affect the conditions of being without conscience. And though, as we are about to see, just what these influences are remains somewhat obscure. The speculation about social factors that make the most immediate intuitive sense is childhood abuse. Perhaps some people with a genetic and neurological predisposition to sociopathy ultimately become sociopathic while others do not, because the ones who become sociopathic are abused in childhood. Okay, according to this doctor, these people that we're talking about, they actually were abused as a child. So I'm going to throw this out there because I think based on what I see, and I'm no doctor, I don't claim to be, I'm just a person trying to enjoy learning about new things. I'm going to use the name Edgar. We know who that is. From what I see, Edgar is every one of these. He seems to be able to everything's disposable to him, that kind of thing. Look how many times he's been married. And I have often wondered what happened to him as a child. What type of abuse did he suffer to make him be the way he is now? To have that feeling that everything is disposable. Was he disposable as a child? I'd like to know that, I would. Anyway. And the abuse worsens their psychological status and possibly even their already compromised neurological functioning. After all, we know as certainly that childhood abuse has a large number of other negative outcomes, among them run-of-the-mill non-sociopathic juvenile delinquency and the violence, adult depression, suicidality, disassociation, and various divisions of consciousness, anorexia, and chronic anxiety and substance abuse. Psychological and sociological studies show us beyond the shadow of a doubt that the childhood abuse is unrelenting, toxic, to the psyche. Okay, now listen, I was not abused as a child, but I did go through anorexia because I just had a fear of getting too big. I know that sounds crazy. I know it does, but this was when I was in high school, and I wanted to stay that cute little person. I didn't want to. Anyway, but I was not abused as a child. That's just so I don't agree 100% with this. Okay, but the problem with attributing sociopathy to early abuse is that, quite unlike non-sociopathics, juvenile delinquency, and ordinary violent behavior, there is no convincing body of findings linking the core characteristics of sociopathy, that is, the absence of conscience, with childhood maltreatment. Furthermore, sociopathy as a group is not afflicted with other tragic consequences of childhood abuse, such as depression and anxiety. And we know from a substantial accumulation of research evidence that survivors of early abuse, whether they are law breaking or not, are predictably plagued by such problems. In fact, there is some evidence that sociopaths are influenced less by their early experiences than are non-sociopaths. And Robert Hare's diagnostics and statistical studies of the American prison inmates, for example, prisoners who were diagnosed as psychopaths using the psychopathy checklist developed by Hare, quality of family life in childhood had no effect whatsoever on the timing of their criminal behavior. Okay. Whether their family life had been stable or not, those diagnosed as psychopaths first appeared in court at an average age of 14. In contrast, for inmates who were not diagnosed as psychopaths, prisoners' underlying personality structures were normal. The age at which criminal behavior began was strongly linked with the quality of family background. Those with a more stable past first appeared in the court at an average age of 24, and those with troubled background came to the court at the age of about 15. In other words, hardscrabble existence nurtures and hastens extraordinary criminal activity, just as one might expect, but the criminality that results from the remorselessness of sociopathy has the appearance of flowering all by itself and according to its own timetable. Still searching for environmental influences on the development of sociopathy, many investigations have turned to the concept of attachment disorder, rather than childhood abuse per se. Normal attachment is an innate system in our brain that motivates an infant to seek the nearness of their parent or whatever caregiver is available, so that very first interpersonal relationship can be formed. The first relationship is crucial, not only for some reasons of infant survival, but also because it allows the infant's immature limbic system to use the mature functions of the adult's brain to organize itself. When a parent reacts empathically to an infant, the child's positive emotions, such as contentment and elation, are encouraged, and her potentially overwhelming negative emotions, such as frustration and fear, can be moderated. This arrangement promotes a sense of order and safety that will eventually be encoded in the baby's own memory, providing her with a portable version of what Joe Bowlby, his name is Bowlby, referred to as attachment and loss, as a secure base in the world. Research tells us that the adequate attachment in infancy has many happy outcomes, including the healthy development and emotional self-regulation, autobiographical memory, and the capacity to reflect upon one's own experiences and actions. Perhaps most important, attachment in infancy allows the individual to create affectionate bonds with other people later on. The earliest attachments are formed by 7 months of age, and most human infants succeed in becoming attached to their first caregiver in a way that develops these important capabilities. Attachment disorders is tragic condition that occurs when an attachment in infancy is disrupted because of parental incompetence, as a series of emotional disorders on the part of the parent, or because the infant is simply left too much alone, as an old-fashioned orphanage. Aww. Children and adults with severe attachment disorder, for whom attachment was not possible during the first 7 months of life, are unable to bond to others emotionally, and thereby directed to a fate that is arguably worse than death. In the extreme case, as we have discovered in the United States, and the ultra-hygienic orphanages of the 19th and early 20th centuries, infants who are not touched at all for purposes of antiseptic perfection are prone to die quite literally, succumbing mysteriously to conditions that refer to as marasmus. Okay, I'm going to spell it. It's a Greek word, and I'm not sure how to say it. It's MARASMUS. Okay, marasmus. I think it's marasmus, a Greek word that means wasting away, a disorder now called non-organic failure to thrive. Nearly all of the untouched babies in these orphanages perished in the intervening 100 years. Development psychologists and pediatricians have learned that it is crucially important to hold, cuddle, talk to, and caress babies. And by that consequences of not doing so, it's just heartbreaking. In Western Europe, you hear about that all the time over in those Russian orphanages. Well, in fact, I'll tell y'all a little something. Our nephew, he was born in Russia, and he was 10 months old by the time his parents, adopted him. And he was so skinny. He was not even learning to walk. It was as if he was just left in the bed all the time. And from what we understand, that was a common practice over there in Russia in those orphanages. Now, they stopped letting Americans adopt those children a few years back. I don't know if they started up again, but I know they had stopped. So anyway, it was sad, but he's great. He's great. He's a great kid. We all just love him to death. But anyway, let's go on about this. In Western Europe and the United States, which ironically is one of the least tactile societies on earth, the grief and loss that attachment disorder can bring was personally experienced by many families during the compassionate rush in the early 1990s to adopt orphan children from Romania. In 1989, when the communist regime, my dogs are going to bark. Ugh. Okay, I wish they wouldn't do that. In Romania, so loud. You see, it's like they're right here with us, but they're not. I'm all the way upstairs, so I wish you would hush. The horrifying photographs were released to that rest of the world, and the hundreds of orphanages that had been kept secret by the psychopathic dictator, Nikolai. Oh boy, I think it's his name. We're just going to say Nikolai C. His last name I cannot pronounce. Under his regime, Romania was a nation of nearly unsurvivable poverty. And I'm going to talk real loud, y'all. Just hold on. Yet, Nikolai had prohibited both abortion and birth control. Hundreds of thousands of starving children resulted, and nearly 100,000 orphan children ended up in state-run institutions. Overall, in these orphanages, the ratio of orphans to staff was about 40-1. Can you imagine taking care of 40 children all by yourself? There's no way in hell you can love them all or take care of them all. You just can't. That's terrible. Conditions were grotesquely unsanitary, and except for being given enough food to keep most of them alive, the babies and children were ignored. That just breaks your heart. The kindest solution seemed to be for affluent foreigners to adopt as many of these children as possible. Well-meaning Western Europeans and North Americans brought Romania babies into their homes and lovingly tried to nurse them to health. And then a couple in Paris would discover that their beautiful 10-month-old Romanian daughter was inconsolable and only screamed louder when they tried to hold her. Or a couple in Vancouver would walk into their 3-year-old's room to find that he had just hurled the new kitten out of the window. Or parents in Texas would finally have to admit to themselves that they could not keep their adopted 5-year-old son from spending his days staring into a corner, and that sometimes viciously attacked other children in the middle of the night as they slept. Western Europe and North America had imported an attached disorder nightmare created by a sadistic Romanian sociopath who was no longer even alive. Having been completely deprived of attachment and empathy, many of these rescued children were just loveless. That is horribly sad. I had no idea that this book could make us feel that sad. Anyway, in June of 2001, the new leadership of Romania ordered a ban on foreign adoptions, not out of humanitarian concern, but for political and financial reasons. The European Union had just pronounced that impoverished Romania, which is outflow of orphans, had become a marketplace for children and would be unlikely to achieve membership in the preposterous 15-nation union unless the politically incorrect out-of-country adoptions were terminated. At this writing, more than 40,000 children, a small city's worth, still live in institutions in the Republic of Romania, which is angling for the EU membership in 2007. Especially since the exposure to Romanian orphans crisis, psychologists have wondered whether attachment disorder might be the environmental root of sociopaths. Now, that's a good question, and I would like to know that myself. The similarities are obvious. Children who suffer from attachment disorder are impulsive and emotionally cold and are sometimes dangerously violent toward their parents, siblings, playmates, and pets. They tend to steal, vandalize, and start fires. And they often spend their time in detention facilities when they're young and in jail when they become adults, just like sociopaths. And children with severe attachment disorders are the only children who are almost as fundamentally scary to us as a young sociopath. Wow. The similarities have been noted in many parts of the world. In Scandinavian child psychiatry, for example, a condition called early emotional frustration is thought to be caused by the lack of mutual bonding between the lack of mutual bonding between mother and child. And in Scandinavia, this diagnostic team, early emotional frustration, is used as a flag of child's greater than average chance of developing into a sociopath, the character disorder by adulthood. Early emotional frustration is statistically linked to factors that may make mother-infant attachment more difficult, such as preterm birth, extremely below birth weights, and maternal substance abuse during pregnancy. Oh, okay. So they're saying that substance abuse during pregnancy can cause this early emotional frustration or the lack of ability to attach. Like they don't understand attachment. There's some minor design problems in this kind of research. For instance, certain factors such as maternal substance abuse during pregnancy could easily implicate sociopathic mothers, and therefore a return to the genetic explanation. But the major problem with the equation of the attachment disorder and sociopathy, despite the scientifically tempting commonalities of the two, is their persistent and undeniable dissimilarity with respect to the trademark features of a sociopath. Quite unlike sociopaths, children and adults afflicted with attachment disorders are seldom charming or interpersonally clever. On the contrary, these unfortunate individuals are typically somewhat off-putting, nor do they make any great efforts to fake being normal. Many are isolates. Their emotional presentation is flat and uninviting, and sometimes directly hostile, and they tend to swing between their distinctly non-seductive extremes of belligerent indifferences and unmeetable neediness. None of this allows in any way for the chameleon-like manipulations and con games of the sociopath with his smiling deceptions and dismaying charisma, and for this intermittent success in the maternal world that the rather sociable sociopath often achieves. God, this is so worrying. Many clinicians and parents have reported that sociopathic children refuse to form a warm relationship with family members. They tend to pull away, both emotionally and physically. And of course, so do children with attachment disorders. But very unlike the situation with a sad attachment disorder child, detachment from family is much more likely to be a result of the young sociopath's way of being in the world rather than it being the cause of it. And so, in summary, we have some idea of what one of the underlying neurobiological deficits in a sociopathy may be. The sociopaths who have been studied reveal a significant aberration in their ability to process emotional information at the level of the cerebral cortex. And from examining the readability studies, we can speculate that these neurobiological underpinnings of the core personality features of sociopathy are much as 50% heritable. The remaining causes, the other 50%, are much foggier. Neither childhood maltreatment nor attachment disorder seems to account for the environmental contribution to the loveless, manipulative, and guiltless existence of the psychologist, boy, called the sociopathy. Why did she have to put that other word there? She should have said of the sociopathy. How non-genetic factors affect the development of this profound condition, and they almost certainly do have an effect, and it's still mainly puzzled. The question remains, once a child is born with this limiting neurological glitch, what are the environmental factors that determine whether or not he will go to display the full-fledged symptoms of a sociopath? At the present, we simply do not know. Now it's going to talk about culture, So this is kind of interesting, and I'm glad we're on this chapter because you know a lot of people, you do. And the one thing you do know about these people is whether they have these traits or not. Family members have these traits or not. I mean, I could not imagine why anyone in my direct family would have this, but I don't know. I'd have to think about that, I guess. It is entirely possible that environmental influences of sociopathy are more reliably linked with broad cultural characteristics than with any particular child rearing factors. Indeed, relating the occurrence of sociopathy to culture has so far been more fruitful for researchers than looking for the answer in specific child-rearing variables. Instead of being the product of a childhood abuse within the family or of the attachment disorder, maybe sociopathy involves some interactions between the innate neurological wiring of the individuals and the larger society in which they end up spending their lives. The hypothesis is bound to disappointing to some people because through altering the conditions of pregnancy, childbirth, and child treatment on a massive scale would be no small project. Changing the values and belief systems of an entire culture is even more gigantic undertaking, and with time of horizon that seems distant and discouraging. We might feel little less daunting if we were to identify a set of child rearing practices that we could try to correct in our lifetimes. But perhaps society is the true parent of certain things, and we'll eventually find that. As William Ralph Ing said in his early 20th century, the proper time to influence the character of a child is about 100 years before he's born. Okay, now that's just a lot, isn't it? From recorded observations, we do not know that sociopaths by various names have existed in all kinds of societies worldwide and throughout history. As an illustration, psychiatric anthropologist Jane M. Murphy describes the initial concept of what's this word? Hang on, y'all. Concept of it looks like it says one thing, but I don't want to say this word because it looks like it says colonigeneta. Okay, colonigeneta, which refers to a person whose mind knows what to do but does not do it. Murphy writes that the Northeast Alaska colonigeneta might be, that is a hard word, might be applied to the man who, for example, repeatedly lies and cheats and steals things and does not go hunting when the other men are out of the village. He takes sexual advantage of many women. The Inuit tactically assumes that, oh, this is terrible, the colonigeneta is irremediable. Oh my God, this is just a terrible chapter. And so, according to Murphy, the traditional, oh my God, that dog needs to hush. The traditional approach to such a man was, according to Murphy, to insist to make him go hunting, and then, in the absence of witnesses, push him off the edge of the ice. Okay, so here's what they're saying. They're saying that when they would find this in their little village, they would force him to go hunting, and they would just take him out because they don't want that in their village. Okay. Though the sociopathy seems to be universal and timeless, there is credible evidence that some cultures contain fewer sociopaths than do others. Intriguingly, sociopathy would appear to be relatively rare in certain East Asian countries, notably Japan and China. Studies conducted in both rural and urban areas of Taiwan have found a remarkably low prevalence of antisocial personality disorders, ranging from 0.03 to 0.14, which is not none, but impressively less than the Western world's approximate average of 4%. Well, they did say, what did they say? 1 out of 25 children, so that's 4 out of 100, would be a sociopath. Mm-hmm. So, boy. In 1991, Epidemiologic Catchment Area Study, sponsored the National Institute of Mental Health, reported that in 15 years preceding the study, the prevalence of antisocial personality disorder had nearly doubled among the young in America. It would be difficult closing in on impossible to explain such a dramatically rapid shift in terms of genetics and neurobiology. Apparently, cultural influences play a very important role in the development of sociopathy in any given population. Few people would disagree that, from the Wild West of the past to the corporate outlaws of the present, American society seems to allow and even encourage me-first attitudes devoted to the pursuit of domination. Robert Hare writes that he believes our society is moving in the direction of permitting, reinforcing, and in some instances, actually valuing some of the traits listed in psychopathy checklist. Traits such as impulsivity, irresponsibility, lack of remorse. In his opinion, he's joined by theorists who propose that North American culture, which holds individualism as central value, tends to foster the development of antisocial behaviors and also to disguise it. In other words, in America, the guiltless manipulation of other people blends with social expectations to a much greater degree than it would in China and other more group-centered society. Wow, that's making us look really bad, isn't it? It is. I believe there's a shinier side of this coin, one that begs the question of why certain cultures seem to encourage pro-social behaviors so much against the odds. How is it that social societies have a positive impact on incipient sociopaths who are born with an inability to process interpersonal emotions in the usual way? I would like to suggest that the overriding belief systems are certain cultures encourage born sociopaths to compensate cognitively with what they are missing emotionally. In contrast, with our extreme emphasis on individualism and personal control, certain cultures, many in East Asia, dwell theologically on the interrelatedness of all living things. Interestingly, this value also the basis of conscience, which is an intervening sense. Oh boy, which is an intervening sense of obligation rooted in a sense of connectedness. If connection to others in an emotional way, perhaps culture that insists on connectiveness as a matter of belief can instill a strictly cognitive understanding of interpersonal obligations. An intellectual grasp of one's duties to others is not the same attribute as the powerfully directive emotion of we call conscience, but perhaps it's enough to extract pro-social behavior from at least some individuals who would have behaved only in an antisocial way had they been living in a society that emphasized individualism rather than interrelatedness. Though the lack of internal mechanism, the lack of internal mechanism that tells them they are connected to others, the larger culture insists to them that the days are so connected as opposed to our culture, which informs them reasonably that their ability to act guiltlessly on their own behalf is the ultimate advantage. Oh, okay. This would explain why a Western family by itself cannot redeem a born sociopath. What do you mean can't redeem them? Okay. Okay, this when we get through this chapter, we might have to quit because okay, no, okay, we'll just keep going for a little bit. Okay. For example, repeatedly lies. Okay, so these children repeatedly lies and cheats and steal things. This does not go hunting when the other men out of the village. Remember they talked about they just they don't miss that page. Hang on, we got to go to the next page. We already said that because they they killed. Okay, too many other voices in the larger society implying that his approach to the world is correct. As tiny example, had Skip the American been born into a strongly Buddhist culture or Shinto, would he have killed all those frogs? No, he would not have. No, they don't allow that. They're at peace with the world. They don't kill things. Perhaps or perhaps not. His brain would have been the same, but all the people around him would have maintained that respect for life was necessary. Everyone in his world would have been on the same mind, including his wealthy parents, his teachers, his playmates, and maybe even the celebrities who saw him on television. Skip would still have been Skip. He would have felt no honor for the frogs, no guilt if he murdered them, and no repugnance by he might have refrained. Oh boy, no repugnance. But he might have refrained from doing so because his culture had unanimously taught him a lesson, something on the order of proper table manners about how to fit in, a lesson that his perfectly good intellect had mastered. Sociopaths do not care about their social world, but they do want and need to blend in with us. Of course so. I mean, nobody's going to be friends with them if they don't blend in. I mean, if every time you meet up with somebody, they treat you the same way, they never care about you, it's all about them, you're going to quit hanging out with them. They have to fit in with us. Okay. Of course, I'm implying that our own culture would teach a child like Skip that he could torture small animals and still be passively disguised among us. And regretfully, I think this reflects as a fair assessment of our current plight. Wow. Now we're going to talk about warriors. Let's talk about warriors. Within the context of human society as a whole, across cultures, is there anything about the lack of caring and the absence of conscience that could be considered positive or at least useful? As it happens from a certain point of view, there is one such thing. Whether the victim is a frog or a person, sociopaths can kill without experiencing anguish. Thus, people who have no conscience make excellent, unbenevolent warriors. And nearly all societies, Buddhist, Shinto, Christian, and purely capitalist, they all make war. To some extent, we can think of sociopaths as being shaped, maintained by society because nations have often required cold-blooded killers. From anonymous foot soldiers to the conquerors who have made and continue to make human history. Sociopaths are fearless and superior warriors, snipers, undercover assailants, special operations, vigilantes, and hand-to-hand specialists because they experience no horror while killing or while ordering somebody to kill somebody, and no guilt after the deed is done. By far, most people, the bulk of our armies, cannot be so emotionless, and they're not carefully conditioned. Most normal people make fourth-rate killers at best. Even when taking the lives of other people is deemed to be necessary. A person can look another person in the eye and calmly shoot him dead is unusual and in war very valuable. Strangely, some acts are so emotionally bankrupt that they require the absence of conscience, just as astrophysics requires intelligence and the art requires talent of warriors who could operate without conscience. Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman writes, and this is in the book, it's called whether called, it says, writes, in On Killing. Whether they are a distinct minority or in times of danger, a nation needs them desperately. Okay, well, we have to have them, so I guess it's good that there's, 400. But these same nations pay a concealed price when their borders for the glory they bestow on their still cold killers. In the path to such glory does not go unnoticed by others for whom the guiltless killings is a special aptitude. Others will never find themselves working behind the enemy lines. Their self-appointed remain at home among the rest of us and maintain invisibly. From Rambo to Baghdad, the glorification of killing, the glamorizing of the deepest infraction of normal conscience has been a lasting feature of our mainstream culture and may well be the most pernicious environmental influence of all the vulnerable sociopathic minds in our midst. The owner of such a mind does not necessarily kill, but as we are about to find out in the next chapter, when he does, he is not always the person one would have suspected. Oh, so I guess because they hide amongst us, Okay, let's see. Now, chapter 8. Let's see how many pages chapter 8 has. Because, I want to hurry up and get through this book because I want to move on to other books so bad. But I'm going to finish what we started. I just think we have to finish what we started. And there's 12 chapters in this book. So, okay. We'll just keep going for, let's go for we'll go 20 more minutes. How does that sound? I think it sounds good. Let's just go. Because I want to finish this. Okay. I wanted to talk to someone, and I think it's because my father's in prison. Hannah, the pretty thin-lipped 22-year-old who was my new patient, directed this barely audible remark to her right toward one of my bookshelves. After a moment, she looked at me directly, shyly, and repeated herself, I need someone to talk to. My father's in prison. She made a tiny gasp as if effort of this much speech had exhausted her lungs, and then she was silent, especially when people are very frightened. A certain amount of doing therapy is simply knowing how to paraphrase the comments of the person seated before you without sounding judgmental or patronizing. I bent forward slightly, my fingers laced around my knees, and tried to recapture Hannah's gaze, which had now dropped to the rust-colored oriental rug between our chairs. I said quietly, Your father's in prison. Yes, she looked up slowly when she answered, almost surprised as if I had gleaned this information telepathically. He killed a man. I mean, he didn't mean to, but he killed a man. And now he's in prison. Yes, he is. She blushed, and one of her eyes filled. She started crying. Oh, that's sad. I'm always impressed by the fact that even the tiniest amount of being listened to, the barest suggestion of the possibility of a kind treatment, can bring such immediate rush of emotion. I think this is because we're almost never really listened to. In my work as a psychologist, I'm reminded every day of how infrequently we are heard. Any of us, our own actions even marginally understood. And one of the ironies of my listening profession, it is the lesson that in many ways, each of us ultimately remain a mystery to everyone else. How long has your father been in prison, I asked. About 41 days. There was really a long trial. They didn't keep him in prison during the trial. And you felt that you needed to talk to someone? Yes, I can't, she said. It's just so, and depressed. I think I'm getting depressed. I have to start med school. Med school? You mean in September? It was July. Yes, I wish I didn't have to. The tears came soundless once, no weeping noises, and in the rest of her she was unaware she was crying. Streams fell from her eyes and rolled down onto her white silk shirt, making translucent stains. Apparent from this, her demeanor remained unchanged, stoic. Her face did not fall. I'm always moved by stoicism. Hannah's was extreme, and I was hooked. Using both forefingers, she showed her straight black hair into a submission behind her ears. Her hair was so shiny, it looked as if someone had polished it. She gazed past me at the window and asked, "Do you know what it's like for your father to be in prison?" "No, I don't. Maybe you'll tell me." Well, that was kind of a smart ass thing to say, I think. Wow. I think you should have had a little more compassion, don't you? Mm-hmm. Her father had been the principal of the public high school in the middle class suburb of Hannah, where she was raised, in a different state, 1,000 miles away west of Boston. According to Hannah, he was an extremely likable man who naturally drew people to him, a star, as Hannah put it, and was much loved by the students, the teachers, and nearly everybody else in the small community. He was always at the cheerleading practices and the football games, and whether or not the home team won was personally important to him. Born and raised in the rural Midwest, he had strong conservative values. Hannah said he believed in patriotism and mightily defended country. He also education and self-betterment. Hannah was his only child, and for as long as she could remember, he had told her that even though she was not a boy, she could be whatever she wanted to be. Girls could be whatever they wanted to be. Girls could be doctors. Hannah could be a doctor. Hannah loved her father dearly. "He's the sweetest, most moral man in the world. He really is," she told me. "You should have seen all the people who came to the trial. They just sat there and cried for him, cried and cried. They felt so sorry for him. But there was nothing they could do. Nothing they could do." The killing took place on a March night when Hannah was in a sophomore in college. At that time, she happened to be home on spring break. In the wee hour, she had been wakened by a very loud noise outside her parents' house. "I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was a gun till later," she said. She got up slowly and to look around and found her mother standing just inside the open front door of the house, weeping and wringing her hands. The March air was rushing in. It's the weirdest thing. I can still close my eyes and see her standing there like that. The wind was blowing her bathrobe around, and it was like I knew everything that happened, right at the moment before I even knew anything. I knew what had happened. I knew my father would be arrested. I saw it all. Well, that's like a picture from a nightmare, right? The whole thing was like a nightmare. You can't believe it's happening in real life, and you keep thinking you'll wake up. Sometimes I still think I'm just going to wake up, and everything was just going to be a horrible dream. But how did I know everything before I even knew anything I saw? My mom standing there. Or maybe not. Maybe it just seems that way now when I remember, I don't know. As soon as she saw Hannah, her mother grabbed her and it was pulling her daughter out of the way of an oncoming train and screamed at her, "Don't go out there, don't go out there." Hannah made no move toward the outside, nor did she press her mother for explanation. She just stood there in a terrified mother's embrace. I'd never seen her like that before. Hannah, still like I kept waiting to say, it was almost as if I'd been through it already. I knew I'd better stay inside. At some point, Hannah is not sure how long this took. Her father came in by the wide open front door to the place where she and her mother stood clutching each other. He didn't have the gun in his hand. He dropped it out there in the yard somewhere. Wearing only pajama pants, he stood before his little family. He looked fine. He was sort of panting, but he didn't look frightened or anything. And for just a second, just about a half a second, I thought maybe everything was going to be okay. As she told me this, Hannah's tears came again, but I was too scared to ask what happened. After a while, my mom let go of me. She went and she called the police. Oh no, the mother had to call the police. I remember, she says. I remember she asked him, is she hurt? And he said, "I think so. I think I hurt him really bad." And then she went into the kitchen and she called the police. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Right? I said it was a rhetorical question, really. In bits and pieces, Hannah learned what had happened. Earlier during that awful night, Hannah's mother, always like a light sleeper, heard noises coming from the living room. Sounds like a breaking of glass, and had roused her mother from sleeping. There were more noises. The man in the house became convinced that there was an intruder and dealt with it. He got out of the bed and to prepare. He carefully, according to his wife, by only the dim illumination of a tiny book light, he took out the box, and he kept it in the bedroom closet, unlocked it, and he loaded the gun. His wife pleaded with him simply to call the police. He never even replied to her. He hissed at her, "Stay here. And still in near darkness, he left for the living room. Seeing him, or more likely hearing him, the prowler fled the house by the front door. Hannah's father gave chase, shot at the man, and by sheer blind luck, as one of his attorneys would put it, he hit him in the back of the head, killing him instantly. Oh, Lord. As it happened, the intruder fell on the sidewalk between the lawn and the curb. This meant technically that Hannah's father had shot an unarmed man on the street. Oh, my God. Strangely, incredibly, no neighbors came out of their houses. Everything was so quiet, so very quiet. Hannah said to me there in my office, she goes, the police arrived quickly after Hannah's mother called them, followed by a few more people and a silent ambulance. Eventually, her father and her mother were taken away to the police station. My mother called her sister and my uncle to come stay with me for the rest of the night, just like I was suddenly a little girl all over again. They weren't any help. They were pretty hysterical. I think I just felt really numb. The next day, and in the following weeks, the situation occupied the local media's interest, and the shooting had taken place in a quiet middle-class suburb. The shooter was an ordinary middle-class man with no known history of violence. He had not been drunk, nor had been using drugs. The dead man was a known felon, a drug addict, and just before he was shot, he had broken into the house through the window. No one except the prosecuting attorney disputed that this was a robber, or that Hannah's father had pursued and shot him because he had been an intruder in the house. This was the victim's rights case. There was a gun control case. This was getting tough on a crime case. It clearly illustrated the dangers of being a vigilante, or maybe even demonstrated conclusively that the homeowners ought to have increased rights. The ACLU got mad, the NRA even more so. There was a long trial, as Hannah had said, and then an appeal and another long trial. And in the end, Hannah's father was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to a maximum of 10 years in prison. The attorney said it was more likely to be only 2 or 3. The news of the high school principal sentenced to 10 years in prison for shooting a burglar on his front lawn aroused strong emotions. There were protests on all sides. The decision was unconstitutional, and it defied common sense of natural law. The convicted man was a dangerous self-appointee and a rights violator. He was an American hero and a family protector. He was a violent man. He wasn't a violent man. He was a martyr to the cause, to any number of causes. Though all of this, impossibly, Hannah was going to college, making A's, and applying to medical school, activities dogmatically insisted upon by her embattled father. He just wouldn't allow my life to be ruined by all the stupidity. That's what he said. And Hannah got into nearly every medical school she applied to, despite her father's predicament. She told me that if anything, the whole thing probably helped me get in. He was a cause. Wow. Okay. Finished with her narrative, Hannah searched through a small leather handbag, found a tissue, and began to blot her cheeks and dab at the streaks on her shirt. This she even did, though there was a full box of tissues in plain sight on a little table just to the left of her elbow. So you see, I don't really need therapy exactly, but I really would like to talk to someone. I really don't want to be this depressed when I start medical school. I don't know. Do you think it would be all right for me to see you? Hannah had affected me with her story and with her demeanor. I felt tremendous sympathy for her, and I told her so. To myself, I wondered how much help should we actually be able to accept from me, the psychological trauma, the therapist she had called because she had seen my name in the newspaper. Out loud, we agreed to meet once a week for a while, so Hannah could have someone to talk to. The medical school she had finally chosen was in Boston, and at her mother's urging, she had moved east right after her college graduation, so she could be settled before it started, and from the craziness back home. Her mother felt that the situation with her husband was negative for her daughter. I thought I had seldom heard such an understatement, and I assured Hannah that yes, it would be all right for her to see me. After she left, I paced around my office for a minute or two, staring out the tall windows onto the Boston Back Bay, walking over to the rifle of papers on the wide, cluttered desk, and then returning to the windows as I often do after sessions in which someone has told me a great deal, but not nearly everything. As I paced, I was interested not so much in the legal and political questions of who, what, and when, or where, but rather in the psychology's parental questions of why. Hannah had not asked why. Why did my father shoot the gun? Why didn't he just let the man go? I reflected emotionally that she could not afford to ask why, as the answer might be too unsettling. The entire relationship with her father was at stake, and maybe this was the reason she needed to help with her to navigate through the conceivable answers to this perilous question. Perhaps her father had been caught up in the frenzy in the moment and had shot the gun almost accidentally, hitting the intruder lethally in the back. And as the attorney had said, or perhaps her father had genuinely believed his family was in danger and his protective instincts had taken over him. Or perhaps Hannah's father, the family man, this ordinary middle-class high school principal, was a killer. No, he wasn't a killer. In subsequent sessions during that summer and in the fall, as Hannah began medical school, she told me more about her father. In the kind of work I do, I often hear about behaviors and events that the patient herself, over her lifetime, has grown used to and thinks it's normal. But that to me sounds distinctly abnormal and sometimes alarming. This kind of report is what I soon began to get from Hannah. As she described her father, though she was obviously believed he was just recounting unremarkable stories, I pieced together the picture of an emotionally cold individual whose means and controlling actions made me cringe. Also, I became familiar with the understandable haze my intelligent young patient was lost when it came to seeing her father for what he was. So I guess to her it was normal because she grew up, she grew up this way. He was always like that. I mean, nothing new here, right? That's sad. That's really sad. In subsequent sessions during the summer and in the fall, as Hannah began medical school, she told me more about her father and the kind of work. And I often do hear behaviors and events that the patient herself, over her lifetime, has grown used to and thinks is normal. But to me, abnormal. Hannah, as she described her father, she obviously believed she was recounting unremarkable stories. I pieced together the picture of an emotionally cold individual whose means and controlling actions made me cringe. Also, I became familiar with the understandable haze my intelligent young patient was lost in seeing what her father was. Oh, we read that, but that's okay. I discovered that Hannah's fathers dealt with his pretty wife and his high-achieving daughter more like trophies than human beings, usually ignoring them completely when they were sick or having difficult times for some other reason. But lovingly, Hannah Hannah reinterpreted her father's callous treatment of her. He's really proud of me, she said, or so I've always thought. And so he can't stand it when I make mistakes. Once when I was the fourth grade, my teacher sent a note home and that I wasn't doing my homework. Dad didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. I know it was 2 weeks because I had this little calendar. I still have it somewhere. And I marked off the days one by one. It was as if suddenly I didn't even exist. It was awful. Oh, and another good example, more recent, I was in high school already. His high school. Oh, that's a shame. We have to go to school and your father's the principal. Yeesh, that's going to be hard. I got this really huge, ugly blemish on my cheek. She pointed to an empty space on her lovely complexion. He didn't say a word to me. Wouldn't even look at me for 3 days. He was such a perfectionist. I guess he wants to show off, and when something's wrong, he really can't do that. It makes me feel bad about myself and sometimes, but I suppose I can understand it more or less. Hannah described a time in her childhood when her mother had been critically ill and in the hospital for nearly 3 weeks. Hannah believed her mother had contracted pneumonia, but she said, I was really too young to remember much about it. Hannah's aunt had taken her to see her mother during the time, but her father had not visited his wife, not once while she was hospitalized. When she returned home, he was angry and agitated, concerned that his pale and weakened wife might not get her beauty back, as Hannah phrased it. As for Hannah, her pretty mother, there's really isn't much to tell. Hannah, she's sweet and gentle. She's always taken good care of me, especially when I was little. She likes to garden and she does a lot of charities and such. She's just a really nice lady. Oh, and she was the homecoming queen when she was in high school. Dad likes to tell people about that. I see. The trophy wife. Here we go. The trophy wife and the trophy daughter. When I presented Hannah about her mother's reaction to her father's neglectful behavior, she said, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, there were things that would have made me really angry if I'd been my mom. But she never said anything. She just kind of goes her own way. Like I said, she's a sweet, gentle lady. This probably She probably goes along with it. She's never really stood up for herself very much. She certainly never confronts Dad. I mean, I think I'd faint dead away if she ever did that. She's the perfect lady. Her only little flaw is, if you could even call it that, is her vanity. She's really beautiful, and I think she knows it, and she spends a lot of time working on her hair and her body and such. I think she sees that her only power in the world is, if that makes sense, is her beauty. Okay, we're going to stop on page 140 because it's almost 5:30, which would be an hour and a half. And we'll just come back to this the next time. I want to finish this book so bad. Thank y'all for coming in with us and enjoying it with me. I know, it's a lot to listen to this. We have to finish what we start. We can't just walk away from it because all of a sudden it got boring. I'm not going to do that. But anyway, I think I'm going to go live. Maybe, what's tomorrow? Maybe Friday afternoon. We'll try to do 3. I'll try to go at maybe 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4:30, something like that. I want to try to do about 3 of the chapters then. So I want you to enjoy your evening. I'm sure I'll see y'all over on, on chat somewhere and somebody's chat this afternoon somewhere. So anyway, until we meet again, bye. So good to see you. Thank you for coming in. Enjoy your evening. Bye. See you later.